Welcome back to With Hat and Cattle, where we bring you stories from people who walk the walk and leave you better off for listening. Today we have in studio Paul Byrne, who recently released his book, Adapt or Die, the Real AI Playbook. And in an effort, again, to help increase AI literacy and keep up to date with everything that's going on with AI, we brought in an expert to speak to his journey, his background, and offer some takeaways, things that you could do today to help increase your AI literacy. So, without further ado, Paul, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
We're so glad to have you in studio. So, that title, Adapt or Die, is so strong. Give us a little bit of background about that.
About the title?
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit embarrassed because the title was not my idea.
Oh.
I wrote the book first.
Okay.
And then I was coming up with a title, and I used AI to kind of generate some ideas about it, and I came up with about 4 of them, and then I presented them to my team at Razoyo, in the company, and that was my least favorite title, but they loved it, and they thought it really spoke to what the book was about, and that it would be very attention grabbing.
100%.
but also true to what's in it. It's not clickbait. It really does emphasize the point that you do have to. We're in a time where we have to adapt. It's not the first time as
right,
a society we've had to.
Yes, and we're going to get into that because your background, you actually kind of have a pivot at some point, right? Because you were in marketing and then you pivoted to technology.
Yeah,
I got that right. So you started in Europe.
Yeah, I got my master's degree at a university in Milan called Bocconi University. The program's called SDA Bocconi. And the school there, I was attracted to. I had married a girl from Italy. We're still married today. Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. There's another podcast there in that story. Yes.
Yeah. So I ended up going to that school for my MBA program, and I worked for a German company after school.
Okay.
So this was in 1992, and during the year of 1992 was the year when the EU kind of technically existed, but at that time when you would pass from, say, Germany to France or cross a border, there were customs borders, and companies had to deal with different customs and different you had all the paperwork that was associated with that, and so it was expensive to do business kind of across borders. And there was this German company in the consumer electronics business. They were providing consumer electronics accessories.
Okay.
So they actually developed and made their own video editing equipment for home, which was using like 2 VHS recorders and copying stuff. It was actually quite good, but nothing like the digital stuff we have today, right? So it was just pre-digital. But the borders were coming down, and so they were either acquiring their import in other countries, like France, Spain, UK, etc., or they were starting new companies, and to become, just local offices, affiliates of the mother company in Germany. And so that was my assignment, was to help them do that. So I helped them open up, Spain and Italy and France and a little bit the UK. They already had a really good team in the UK, and they had good people in most of the countries they were in. So I was just more kind of helping them get started.
Okay.
Which is how I ended up being deported from Austria.
Oh no.
I had a friend who was in the company, a peer colleague. His name was Mark Vishman. And if he hears this, he'll just be thrilled that I mentioned his name on the internet. But he was opening up the company in Italy, in Milan. And so he asked me to drive his stuff down to Milan. So I packed up my wife and my son, who was about 2 years old at the time, into one of these Hertz panel rental vans. and we drove his, I can't remember, like his bed and maybe his oven or something. There was like a variety of like stuff in the back of the truck. And I got down to Milan successfully. We opened up that company. And then as we were driving back, the fastest way to get to Hamburg, which is where the company was located, was on the A1, which kind of linked up best through Austria. So you end up driving through Switzerland into Austria and then into Germany as you make your way north. And we were entering Austria from Switzerland.
Okay.
And I was under the impression, so I drove past the border, checkpoint, and the guy was just waving cars by for the most part. And I thought he had waved us by.
Oh no.
But he had not.
So,
so I stopped. I looked at him. I thought he was waving me on. So I just kind of, slowly, I wasn't peeling out.
Yeah.
Just slowly, hit the gas, was proceeding. And then I hear this boom on the side of this panel band. And he had smacked it really hard. I don't know, with his hand, with his stick. I don't know what he had. I don't think he had a gun.
No.
But and so I stopped, of course. I rolled down the window, and he's like, Postkarten, was our passports. So I hand him our passports. He takes them, and he starts walking away. And he's signaling to me to, follow him. And basically, he walked back into Switzerland. So we turned around, did a U-turn, and he handed me my passports and told us to leave his country.
Oh my gosh, that must have been scary. So much.
I had no idea where this was going to end up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I mean, we drove, I don't know, 5 or 10 miles down the road. I found another crossing point, and we went through without incident. Although that time I just had my passports in hand when we drove past.
Yeah, you were ready.
Yeah, I was ready.
So how long were you in Europe before you moved over to the U.S.?
So including school, total time I spent about 6 years in Europe.
Okay.
But I had been back to the U.S. Between that time.
Okay.
But after graduate school, it was another 4 years, I guess, or 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
After that.
So when you came back, did you come back with a company, or did you start your entrepreneurial journey then?
No. So I was fortunate. The German company I worked for was a mid-sized company. We had about 250 employees, and I worked directly with the CEO initially, the Geschäftsführer, and we. It gave me an opportunity because he was doing all these deals. He was purchasing companies. I was doing due diligence, et cetera. It was this really great way to figure out like how companies run in practice.
It's invaluable.
Yeah. It was really great. It was a really great experience. And then actually, essentially running the company in France for about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. That was. That was a great experience, but there were some things going on in that company that I had very big concerns about, and so I left, or I started looking for a new job, and at that point, we decided, we should probably go back to the States. Even though my wife's Italian, she prefers to live in the States, and we just started applying for jobs, and I had some connections inside PepsiCo in the Pizza Hut group, and they were very interested for whatever reason. I never did any international work while I was at PepsiCo.
Okay.
But I definitely, came back with them, and Pizza Hut at the time was headquartered in Wichita, Kansas.
Before we leave the European train station and come over to the U.S., you mentioned, because I didn't realize there was a part where you were in Italy, but then you ran the company in France, or you were a part of the company in France before moving over.
Yeah. So I went from my graduate program in Italy, and I didn't really want to work in Italy. I wanted to pick up another language, another European language.
That's where I was going. Okay.
Yeah. And I I love Italy. I have so many good friends there. My wife's from there. I have family there. I love the country, and there are a lot of great things to love about Italy, but I just wanted a broader European experience.
Yeah.
And so when this German company said, well, and I told them that, they initially wanted to hire me for the position in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, like I want to do something else. And I'm like, hey, like we need somebody to help us open up these companies. And then we're going to need somebody either to go to France or Spain.
Yeah.
And so I was definitely, open to that.
So we've had people on the show, many entrepreneurs who's, there's challenges throughout the way, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I've ever had someone here on the sofa or in the studio who had like a language barrier basically while they're
Oh,
working
yeah.
for a company. How did you navigate that?
So internationally, whether whether it's a Chinese person, Japanese person, or a German and an Italian doing business or negotiating, they're using English.
That's
So
true.
I had
That's
English.
true.
I already spoke Italian fluently.
Uh-huh.
And so Italy was a piece of cake for me. I did half my graduate program in Italian. It was a mixed international program, but I decided to do half of that in Italian. And that really helped because then I knew all of the business Italian. But when I went to Germany, pretty much everybody I spoke to spoke English, and I picked up enough German
Yeah.
to get by.
So it sounds like you were already positioned and prepared for this opportunity.
I think, yeah, to a certain extent, it never would have come up
Right.
had I not done the things I did. So I got a degree in Italian, and I wanted, with a minor in business, and I wanted to do something international. So back then, there was no internet, there was nothing. This was 1988, and so basically, like I sent out 200 letters.
Yeah.
So we got a letter back from, of all places, the Italian Industrial Confederation, which it would be like the National Association of Manufacturers in the U.S., except far more powerful in Italy. It was really kind of one of the three pillars of the economy, which of the manufacturing economy over there. And it's called the Confindustria in Italian.
Uh-huh.
And I met a lot of people there that were very interesting. The parking lot was full of Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and because it was an association for wealthy industrialists, Italy. And so the president at the time was a gentleman named Sergio Pininfarina, and Pininfarina is the engineering design company that does the bodies for like Ferrari, and they do like skis and like all kinds of stuff, industrial design, an amazing company. And he would fly in on his helicopter and land on the roof.
What
right?
an entrance, yes.
Yeah, and you had to go through like this very strict security on the way in. I ended up translating momentarily. It was just like a hallway conversation for Corazon Aquino of the Philippines. She was the president after the Marcos were kicked out. And all of that happened there, but there were a lot of really connected people in there.
Right.
And they said, hey, if you decide you want to go, the University of Bocconi is opening up this international program. If you want to go there, we can put in a good word for you.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that much about it. I later realized that how important in Italy that connection was.
Yes.
And so, I got accepted and given a scholarship. And we went. I moved my wife, and then my son was born the day that I started school.
Again, the lesson there is be prepared for the opportunity.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the U.S.
Sure.
Train Depot.
All right.
Is that where you started? And I believe, if I read correctly in the book, you started with SaaS technology.
Software as a service.
So,
so how did I get into technology?
Yeah, exactly.
So I worked for a couple of companies, and the last company I worked at, I was there 7 years. I really liked my boss, and I still like him. We're good friends to this day, but I struggled with the culture of the company.
Yeah.
And we were kind of on our own for a long time. And I don't mean on our own, but I was kind of insulated from this very sort of sales bro heavy culture that bothered me. And and I got fed up with it. And one day I just like rage quit. Like I was on a conference call. I hung up the call, sent my boss an email. I'm out. And
Yeah.
I left. Right. So that's how I got into
I
technology.
mean,
Yeah. But we were doing things at the time. Like I had been involved in some very, very early e-commerce work with them. And we were using SaaS systems, including, eBay. So eBay is an example of a software as a service,
okay. Yep.
right? And and doing some things with that, kind of selling some products, and I ended up becoming a partner with a friend of mine in his business, and they were doing data entry, and they were doing data entry for the company that I had rage quit
Yeah.
from.
Okay.
It was one of their many clients, and so we kind of figured out how to use that information to help them sell more of their products,
Okay.
and so we did that for them for a while, and then we got involved, in more like email marketing at the very beginning. I don't want to say we were spammers,
Yeah.
but
I'm curious,
maybe.
with hindsight being 2020
Yeah.
and I think back on things I did in my 20s. I'm like, oh, like I would have knowing what I know now, I would have handled that differently.
Yeah.
Would knowing what you know now, would you still have rage quit? Or is sometimes when you reflect on it, do you think, oh, I should have handled that differently?
I do not recommend rage quitting as a career
It's a career.
strategy. Yeah.
There's the title. No, I'm just kidding.
It was one of those things where once it happened, there was really no going back.
You did the whole
Although
burn the boats.
I did do business with them, and
Okay.
and I continue to have contact with some folks there.
Yeah.
Like, it's an interesting company. I'm glad I got out of it.
Right.
I wish I had maybe gotten out a different way, but it was a moment that sort of forced me to evaluate and think, what do I really want to do? And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. Yes. Again, there have been moments of people speak to you as a, like, you're basically on at a fork in the road, right? And it's, you could have chosen, I'm going to continue on this path. It's safe, but you didn't. And that speaks to your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. I have to admit, like, my wife was not a fan of that career move, but we were okay. I mean, I wasn't wealthy, but I had enough money that I could take a little bit of time and decide what to do. A decade earlier, if I had done that, it would have been, really hard on the family.
Yeah.
But it happened when it happened, and I was happy to, to sort of have time to reassess and figure out what I wanted to do. And I had gathered a number of contacts in Dallas area in business, having worked for PepsiCo. I worked for an advertising agency. After that, I'd worked in this company, and I was able to sort of network into some opportunities that at least kept me going. They didn't all completely coincide with my plan, but they did kind of help me formulate a plan. And they kept us. I don't want to say they kept us afloat, because I would have been fine without it. But they, even the fact that there was this company that my friend had that, I became a partner in right away. That was fortuitous for me, even though at the time they were doing something that I wasn't that interested in. And then we eventually, got into e-commerce. And my partner left. He was a media analyst, very talented at that. And he's done extremely well since he left the company. But I think, those are all transition points where you kind of have to evaluate, what am I about?
Is this the birth of Razoyo?
Yeah. So the birth of Razoyo, I had been working with my partner for a couple of years. The company was called Aid Data, which is accurate information and data entry. And the activity of that company, in short, was we had a lot of moms who are at home with kids wanting to get some extra money. And so companies would hold events, and they would send us receipts from these events. or you go to like a stadium and you up a card for like Allstate to enter the raffle, but really, it's being used to market to you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we would get these boxes and boxes of paper with people's information on them, and then we developed a system where we would parse those out into batches, and then those batches would go out to people who were doing the data entry work. And the system we have that was built by my son.
Mhm.
At the time, he was the only programmer I really knew, and we could like track every single scrap of paper that came in, where it was, etc. Our clients loved that, right?
Wow. Yeah.
But that business was destined to diminish in importance, as people started collecting information on kiosks and iPads
Yeah.
and things like that.
That's a theme that was reoccurring in the book, right? Like things come and go, and there's a season for a certain technology,
Yeah.
or and then it gives way to something else.
Yeah.
And now that AI has entered the chat, which
Right.
before that you mentioned in the book, there's a hard date, 1951. That's important
Right.
with AI. Can you double click on that for the audience?
Sure, absolutely. So, 1951 really marks the first, and I don't like, we even wouldn't call it legitimate, but it marks the development of an actual AI product, the first AI system, by a gentleman named Minsky, who wanted to essentially replicate the thinking of a rat in a maze. And so he created this small computer, which was still made with like vacuum tubes, right? So
Okay.
this thing was tiny. It had a wheel on the bottom, and it would move forward, and then it would decide if there was an ability to go to right or left, or go straight forward. It would make a choice. What should it turn or should it go straight?
Was it making those choices with sensors around at the time? I'm not even sure. How was it making those choices?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was being fed the information by, through some sort of interface that Minsky had, like a keypad or something, or a button. Like you don't need much to say, okay, there's a right turn or a left turn here, and then it would say which way it's going to go.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So, and this little computer, the size of a rat, was really the first neural network, which I think if you were to break it down for the geeks out there, it would have been about a 3-node neural network. Now, the reality is it didn't work.
Okay.
Right? It was
takeaway. Yeah.
It couldn't learn.
Yeah.
But there were elements of like possibility within that design, within that implementation, that sparked the development of what we would call, artificial intelligence through software. Today, Minsky went on to form the AI lab at MIT, and I mean, there were people that were very important early on became involved at that point. So that's what happened in 1951.
Okay. When I talk to people about AI, some people say, "Oh, this is just like the .com boom. Eventually, AI is going to peak if it hasn't already, and it's just a few top players are going to emerge." How does that? When I say that, what is your first thought?
So I think if you look at artificial intelligence as the frontier large language models like ChatGPT or Grok or Claude or Anthropic, what have you, then I don't think there's much space for many of those players. It's an extremely expensive game to play. You have to have enormous amounts of funding and hardware to make that work. So I don't think you could have thousands of companies on those frontier models.
Gotcha.
And the same thing with social media. It had very much which would be the prior thing, right? You have to have enough people using your platform, and I'm not going to have 200 social media accounts as a person. I'm going to have a few, and so it's normal that this network effect would essentially cause a concentration in the industry. I don't know that we would say that the best players won, but the survivors won as usual.
Yes,
right. And they maybe absorbed some of the best players. So that's kind of the same effect that we're seeing going on now. The barriers to entry are very high
Mm-hmm.
for a new frontier model.
Right.
And you would have years and years of, catch up to do. Now, that being said, how many companies today use the internet, have a website, own,
Right.
own a URL, millions and millions and millions.
I mean, people have their own URLs for their
Yeah.
resumes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the internet is part of everything we do. And AI, if it's not there yet, will be.
Yeah.
I actually spoke to some people the other day that didn't really have much to do with AI, and they were, these were not 90-year-olds. They were in their 40s, and their jobs just didn't really. AI had not impacted their business, and they weren't interested in it yet. I think what's really interesting and fascinating right now about AI is that there is a lot of resistance by young people to AI. They hate it.
I mean, we just saw in the news, right? There were 2 people at graduate commencement ceremonies that were booed by the graduates when they spoke about AI.
Precisely. But not only that, I talk to a lot of young people, and they don't use Chat GPT. They don't use, my wife, who's my age or a few years younger than I am, uses, like, it's her best friend. But she started to realize that this friend's a bit of a liar and too confident in its responses.
I heard someone recently tell me ChatGPT is a little liar, and I died laughing. Like, that's a true statement.
Yeah. Well, I have a blog post I wrote early on several years ago that ChatGPT is an effing liar.
Yeah.
But it's true, right? And so even she loved it because she could just fact check me immediately on anything I said. And so she found out what a liar I am. My husband says he can't do this. Is it because we can't do it, or he just doesn't want to?
You know what? I'm going to thank her for that.
Yeah. So, this dynamic is strange because that never happened with the internet.
Yeah.
Right. Young people embraced the internet. They grew up. They became known as, internet natives, and it really defined their generation as part of their life. And they, of course, they want to unplug, and they complain about it like we all do. The fact that, like, there's this, constant anxiety of dealing with being constantly plugged into, every brain in the world, right? But at the same time, they weren't really pushing back hard against it.
Yeah.
So I think now, like, the resistance, because they think they're going to go to college and they're going to not get a job because AI is going to replace them, but it's not really part of the equation. The reality is that AI right now, the AI they're dealing with, because they don't have the $200 a month subscription, that I do to Grok or OpenAI or whatever, where I'm getting the best models.
Yeah.
They have the free version, or maybe they're paying $6 a month or whatever. Right. And they're getting a really crappy product. Yeah. Even the inventors of AI, like, said, these are lousy products. And that's the big challenge in our industry today. Expectations are very high on software development companies, but we use a lot of tokens, right? So
can
we
you
have to figure out ways.
What tokens are?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a token is really, you can think of it like a word. It doesn't correspond one-to-one to a word, but when you're typing a prompt into an LLM, a large language model like ChatGPT, and each word is assigned a numerical value, every word in the English language and some non-words have these values associated with them, and that's how the machine reads it. It doesn't, like, read the actual word. And so the tokens are, what goes in. Those are essentially what you call the prompt tokens. But then everything you get out is also a token. And
I didn't realize that.
And in between, the LLM, Yeah, so the longer the response you get, the more tokens you use.
Mm,
And one of the shady things that I think LLMs are doing now is they're set up to use more tokens
I'm
than they
sure.
really need to be. And it's really annoying, although you can tell them to be more terse in their responses, et cetera. And you save a ton of money that way.
Okay.
In fact, there's this
The
the
caveman.
caveman
Yeah.
right thing where you just have it like spit out the absolute minimum.
Yeah.
You know, forget the verbs, forget
The articles.
articles, just like speak like a caveman, and it will do that, and it saves you because every single token that it has to generate,
Mhm.
it charges you for.
That. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
That's going to be a real or the short, right? Because
yeah,
that's invaluable information for people who are just getting started. And for this future generation, it's no longer going to be a standard 4-year degree. It's going to be a whole bunch of certifications, a whole bunch of tech
mm,
understanding. As someone who's studying communication and marketing, my algorithm
right.
is more targeted with how AI can either impact in a good way or in a bad way. I'm curious, have you has that information come across, or can you see that happening as someone who has experienced so much disruption in the tech field?
I feel like you're calling me old, but
No, no. I'm just saying
which is
you've been
true.
on a different journey than I have a liberal arts background, so I feel like I'm asking the expert.
It's funny you should mention that. My bachelor's degree is in Italian.
That's true.
So there's nothing more useless than that. So when these young people come to me, they're like, "Yeah, I just got my degree and it's useless." I'm like, "Hey, try graduating in Italian." Um, but I think something has to happen with the university system.
Mm,
It's far past its prime.
mm-hmm.
I think the young people will miss out on what like a free education. When I say free, I don't mean like you don't pay for it.
Right.
I mean like a liberal education where you're actually you know free to explore topics and subjects. I had to take classes that I didn't really wasn't that interested in. Like if I had to design my own program, would I have taken biology 101 or this other? And I probably wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And the I probably would have loaded up on other things that I was just interested in. And even like looking back on it, once I got a job, I got the only kind of job a guy with a degree in Italian can get, and that's
Uh-huh.
sales.
Uh-huh.
Because I did speak well
Uh-huh.
at that point because I was conversant in an additional language, and that really kind of accelerates your English as well. Like I recommend people learn languages, even though you can just translate with your phone nowadays. It's not for that. It's languages kind of have assumptions about the way you think about things, and
Yes.
so learning a new language teaches you a new way to think, and it's very I think that's a very useful thing
Yeah.
to do. So having all these certifications, I mean, there are certifications now. They've been around since the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Like Microsoft certified system engineers, et cetera, and they've been valuable to a certain extent. I'm not a big fan of those certifications,
Okay.
and I don't think they've got a lot of future to them
Mm-hmm.
simply because those are exactly the kinds of things that AI can do for you. So
Hmm.
I think people should be learning more about the things that only people can do. What makes us human, how humans work, because that's our our superiority to this machine intelligence. Because machine intelligence is not smart. It's just like predicting the next thing to say.
Right now, right?
Right.
But they are working on AGI, which they say we're going to get there when an AI builds an AI.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Yeah?
Not at all. No, not in the least. I AI is not good at creating things that it has not encountered. And I, I'll go back. So
Yes, please.
yeah, so there's a gentleman named Yann LeCun, who's a Frenchman who was the head of AI at Meta for a long time,
Mhm.
and he has his own company now. He's been an AI researcher for a very long time, and he likes to make the distinction between type 1 and type 2 learning, which I go over in detail in my book.
You do.
Yeah, but basically the kind of AI that we have right now is type 1 learning, type 1 thinking, which is really, kind of like the primate brain, the very primary brain functions where you're reacting to something.
Mm-hmm.
So the LLMs, they are actually kind of bringing in, they're predicting what is the best word next to say. And that's why you get like these gaps in performance, because if they haven't been trained on something, they have no idea. Like an LLM is almost like an enormous database.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there have been a lot of measures taken, even since I wrote the book, like reinforcement learning, et cetera, to improve the results. And I think people will say, well, definitely, the LLMs are better than they were a year ago, for sure.
Oh, someone gave a presentation just yesterday, a
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint that was all AI built.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in the past, a year ago, we knew if an image was generated by AI because the word was misspelled. It didn't,
Right,
or it
right.
looked like it was a
Oh,
different
now it's very
language.
professional. It
Oh
looks
my
great.
gosh,
Yeah.
there was no misspellings.
Yeah.
There was there was in the text, flood was spelled with 3 O's, but the image, I was
Yeah.
blown away. And then again, it does make you think like, oh, like this is just as a presentation in the hands of the wrong person,
Yeah.
which has happened. It's crazy. I'm honest.
Yeah.
You speak about the older generation. I worry about my parents, being fooled by AI. I have been fooled by an AI makeup ad. I almost bought it.
Yeah. It does make scamming easier for sure.
But
But
to your point, you're right. Last year,
yeah,
that's AI. This
yeah,
year,
things have improved. But Yann LeCun would say, well, the LLMs are a bit of an off ramp because they focused in on one technology, which is neural networks,
mm-hmm.
and the way that they've been improving has been twofold. So one is they've expanded the amount of data. You've probably heard either the number of tokens the system's trained on or the number of nodes in the neural network. Like these are common terms that you probably hear in the media. Most people don't understand what that means, but basically it's like building a bigger model with bigger data, right? So that's one of the ways. But they still are limited to, everything that's on the internet. So how have they kind of improved upon that? Well, they've done a couple of things. So one is they've hired a lot of people to fill in the gaps,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the AI actually queries them, experts, people who know something about their domain, and they're kind of moving up the expertise scale. They've got PhDs from, Stanford that are now kind of training the LLMs. And so one is just to expand that data set. The other way is to create this thing called synthetic data. And basically the company Tesla, with their full self-driving, they made extensive use of this. And they did a very good job with it, whereas they would create situations that they had not encountered while driving, and they've got like, I don't remember how many billions of miles of driving, of data that they have that they used to train their model on. But there were things that, just simply, either hadn't occurred or were possible, or et cetera. Yeah. And so they would actually create these scenarios using AI to train the other AI models. So you're talking about AI training AI, like it's already happening, and that's been going on for quite some time. The other and then the and then the other way is they basically take the output and they feed it back through. So rather than the initial LLMs, where you gave it a response or a prompt, it fed that prompt through the neural net.
Yes.
Or the model. The neural net was actually used to create the model, but they would feed it through the model, and then you would get the output, right? And then it would take that, it would predict the next word, and then it would take that word and add it to the input, and it would continue predicting. Now they run it through that, so it predicts like whatever's coming out of it. Then they run it through these what they call, the recursive learning, And so they run it through this additional layer of AI, and then they kind of feed everything back through. So it's doing multiple passes.
Mm-hmm.
So the improvements in the model are important, but they're not the whole story on the improvements. And the reality is, like, at some point we're going to kind of hit a ceiling with that, and I think we're already starting to see that. And that's why, trust in AI is relatively low, because people hit its limits. That's why my wife, again, the one who used it to fact check everything I said, so she used AI to fact check me. Then she would realize that, and then she would go do something, and based on what the AI said, and now she's like having to fact check the fact check.
Yes, right.
Right? And it's frustrating. And so, the problem in like software development is we use AI
Mm-hmm.
to help write our code, and 80% of the time, even 90% of the time, even though like the benchmarks will say it gets it right about 70% of the time, the best models,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere between 60 and 70% of the time. I would say that, with good prompting, et cetera, we get it, closer to 80 or 90%. The problem is that 10% is hidden. And so a human has to go through and figure out, am I dealing with a rework situation here? Do I need to change approach? Do I need to repeat this?
Yeah.
And like, God forbid you have somebody who's not an experienced software developer accept, that into the code, this code that was written by the AI that is erroneous, unsecure, unscalable, all of those things. And now, down the road, I'm going to encounter it when I start having problems in production,
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm in trouble. Right now, I've got to go back, and it's a very expensive process. So, how much money does AI save? It allows you to move faster initially, but the actual final engineering process is a little more difficult. So that's one of the downsides.
That's true. And you speak to, I was reminded, when you have that human element that we still need to AI,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Microsoft when it started recording the meetings and then would give you a synopsis
Mm-hmm.
of the meeting.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, there was one use where it speaks to who speaks what percentage of the time.
Yeah.
And so, like for me, I would be at a disadvantage because I'm not going to be very vocal in meetings, which all the business books I read, like, oh, you need to make your voice known and everything for that reason. But if someone were to just look at the numbers, they might think I'm disengaged because, oh, Danny only spoke 5% of the meeting, right? And
Right.
so there are some bias. If someone was using it as a tool for my performance evaluation, I'd be at a disadvantage.
Right.
So that's
Seems
something
like an
to
odd thing to evaluate somebody on.
yeah. Well, it's when we are trying to quantify everything, which I'm a qualitative person. Obviously, we are sitting learning from you, right, about your stories and your background. But in this day and age, there's so much emphasis on quantitative information. So
Yeah.
that's another, I feel, way that we need that human element in
Yeah, I
with
think
AI
so.
tools.
And that kind of bridges the gap. So I was talking about type 1 learning is what we have now. And we just keep piling on more type 1 thinking to to improve the results of the LLMs. And what Yann LeCun was talking about was type 2 learning, and he has these models called JEPA, and it's very technical. I don't even like to talk about it because it takes so long to explain what those models are. But essentially, the idea is that these AI models need to be able to do things that humans can't. And rather than go down to the 4 points which are listed in my book, I think that he put it really well in a recent interview where he said, well, basically, the LLMs, they have no model of the world. They have no idea of the consequences of their actions. They're just coming up with an answer. And even with all this piling on, that's all they're doing, right? Even though we've improved their output, they're still useful. He certainly would not deny that they're useful, but he sees them as like an off ramp to what the research should really be focusing on, which is this type 2 learning. And one example of that is a teenager with about 16 to 20 hours of experience can teach themselves to drive a car. They can learn to drive a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no, like, AI cannot do that. That's
Right.
not the way self-driving works at all. And a teenager could, come up with a scenario that the AI would completely fail at, and yet, they might have been driving for, I don't know, 50 hours total in
Yeah.
their life, and yet for them it would be obvious the correct
Mhm.
decision for that. Doesn't
Right.
mean they're going to make the right decision. They're still teenagers,
Yes.
right? but
Yeah.
but that being said, right, like, that's the difference between those type too. It can't create a plan because it has no idea of the consequences of what it's doing.
And so it's obvious you are very knowledgeable about the
I don't know
subject.
about that.
So what was the I guess what was the gap that you were seeing that led you to like, oh, this book, I need to write this book.
So the big problem that I saw was in conversations I was having with entrepreneurs
Mm.
and leaders in companies that were in e-commerce or other software related fields, and they were afraid. Like, they didn't know what kind of investments to make. They didn't know where it was going to go. They didn't even know if their company was going to be there in a few months. And if you're in the software development business, we are all in that boat right now.
Mm.
Because of not only AI, but because of the impact of the insecurity and the insurity of the future, about the future,
Right.
that comes from all the hype around AI.
Yeah.
And so these two things were really bothering them. And I said, I can't, like, solve your problems. I can't predict your industry. I don't know exactly how AI is going to play out in society. But if you have a framework, you understand a little bit about where it's coming from, a little bit about how it works, and kind of the direction of current research and trends,
Mm-hmm.
then you can at least make better decisions or more confident decisions about the future of your business. And so there were a lot of people that were just, I don't want to say panicked, but there's a lot of anxiety about business strategy because of AI and the disruptions that come with it.
Yeah. So for someone who's listening and still is on they've only used Chat GPT for a trend, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, make me my Barbie character. I know I've done that. Or, some other various trend. What is something you feel they should be learning today if they're at that ground entry, basic prompting, ready to take the next step in learning?
I would encourage you to at least gain a basic understanding of how those models are working. And
Mm.
my book could be a starting point for
Mhm.
that, but there's honestly plenty of YouTube channels you can get into. You do not have to be a software developer. I have a degree in Italian, right? I self-taught my way into tech, and that's kind of a trend that I'm seeing is we're going to have to teach ourselves things that may not be true for very long,
Mhm.
but they will be important for the next few years. So take a look at some of those trends. I would also say talk to a lot of people about how they're using AI.
Yeah.
I get so much, when I talk to somebody, there are tens of thousands of tools now to
There's so
in
many.
AI, right?
Yes.
Everything from video production to things that are, completely transparent to you. There's all kinds of AI that you use every day that you have no idea that the AI is involved at all in that, including like your camera focusing, right?
Yeah.
So all of like, trying to understand in your field how it's being used.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that will be useful, some of it won't, but I think you'll be able to at least start discerning, between, like, the different opportunities that are going to be presented by AI. The other thing is, I would encourage you to stop and think, okay, I see how AI use, and I think everybody can do this exercise,
Okay.
because we've all thought, okay, why doesn't AI do this? Why doesn't AI do that? Why is nobody using AI to do this thing or that thing?
Mm.
And AI, the current AI, the current LLMs, one of the things they excel at is reducing the amount of tedium
Yeah.
that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So look around in your life and say, what is tedious?
Mm-hmm.
that I have to deal with. And I can almost assure you that like AI is going to get applied there. So think about, okay, how can I use the AI tools that I have to maybe reduce this amount of tedium that I have? Agentic AI is like the big thing right now. I think that's going to be a thing for the next few years. And so anybody that's in business, I would strongly encourage to either use one of those tools. My favorite, and the favorite of most people that I deal with from the business side of things, is Claude Cowork. Grok has fewer sort of tools that are developed like that. They just created a new kind of like coding tool that I have yet to beta, but there's a pretty heavy price tag to beta that one. But there are all these things that are being created, but I think you'll see more things like Copilot. ChatGPT, I believe, has a similar system. I'll be honest, I'm not a big OpenAI guy, so I don't use a lot of their tools. You kind of tend to gravitate towards one, one ecosystem or another, and mine just happens to be in Claude because Claude early on was, the superior coding tool. Claude Code was a superior coding tool. Even that is, they've had this big misstep with their latest model and some of the things they've been doing, and I'm seeing developers march over to Codex, which is OpenAI's, and I have people on my staff. I allow them to use whichever tool they prefer, and they've requested to switch over to Codex because Claude has had some problems. I think Anthropic will get it figured out. But in the meantime, there's going to be some pain on their end as they lose subscribers.
And then it gets into the whole discussion about sponsored. If I go into chat and ask it to give me recommendations for luggage, who is the brand that worked with OpenAI to get theirs? I mean, we see it in Google, right? The sponsored results before the results.
It's even worse than that. It's what you don't see
in
Google. The deals that they have to favor, and they'll say, "Well, we don't have any deals," but we're also not going to open source our our algorithm. But I just a week ago started advertising with OpenAI. And so advertising our software development services in Razoyo makes a lot of sense. People go to somebody who is so I've been using it for our e-commerce services first, but somebody that has a problem with their Shopify site or whatever, they're having a conversation with ChatGPT about that. And if that conversation is relevant to what I'm proposing, then they get our ad at the bottom, but it's clear that it's an advertisement, and it's highly targeted. It's too early for me to tell, but it appears to be more effective than, say, my Google ads. But I made a mistake. I'll tell you a funny story about AI, right? So I use a system. I use an agentic framework called Paperclip. It's paperclip.ai.ing or paperclip.ing. And I have it managing all of my marketing communications at this point. You basically create this little company. So I created a company that's an advertising agency within it. And I gave it my objectives, and it's very objective based. And then it'll go and just churn and do, whatever it wants. And the OpenAI advertising platform has an API. So I could give it access to interact with that. I gave it access to interact with that. And I made a mistake. I set budgets for like a month, and it burned through my entire advertising budget in a day.
Oh my gosh.
Which I knew was a problem, so I actually set it low. Right? I knew things can go wrong when you give AI access to your ability to spend money. And I kept tabs on it, but it burned through it so quickly that I was gone away from my desk for a few hours. I come back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just got this enormous amount of traffic to my website, and I burned through my entire marketing budget for the month that I gave it. So I was able to train it. So you have to be very careful. This is agentic AI. So you have to train your agents to do certain things. You have to give it
Yes.
very specific rules,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not perfect at implementing that stuff. So I've created a new workflow that for or approval process for those ads.
Oh, okay.
But the ads were effective. Like they did work. It
Mm-hmm.
wrote the ads, it created the images, did everything,
Yeah.
for it. But my mistake. So
That's
learned from that.
if you
Yeah.
are not careful. I recently Chat GPT now rolled out its own agent building. Like, so now it's on the
Mm-hmm.
sidebar where you can just give it the prompt,
Yeah.
it creates the agent. So I was like, great. I created an agent that every week it looks at contractors and architects and small engineering firms around us that I want
Right.
to target. And I didn't tell it I wanted it to connect to my Google. I don't use any Google product for my work.
Right.
And it had set up for me to connect my Google account so it could email on my behalf to
Right.
these companies, which I don't trust it that much yet. One, and so the
Yeah.
next week it told me I can't run the script or whatever it's called because you haven't connected your Google. And so I reminded it because
That
I'd already told it
Yeah.
we're not using this. So I reminded it again, remove this from your memory because we're not connecting.
Yeah.
And it, of course it wants to placate you, and it's like, oh, that's right, and
Yeah.
then it does its thing.
Yeah. It doesn't want anything. It's just predicting, the word that will provide the effect based on its training. But yeah, that's very, very common. So it will forget things. The memories, the agentic memory is one of the big challenges. And
Mhm.
that's one of the differences between type 1 and type 2 thinking. We're using these agents because basically, like, what is an agent or
Mhm.
a skill? It's a prompt that basically gets glommed on to whatever you're asking it to do. So instead of you having to write out these really long specific prompts, you remember prompt engineering?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, nobody talks about it anymore. But prompt engineering was like you'd create these really long specific prompts that you would feed into the interface, and then it would give you a better result.
Right.
But what it's doing is basically it's taking what you type in and all the memories and the things you've told it and things that have been encoded into other agents, etc. And it's like creating this enormous prompt that it's feeding into the AI. So that's what the agents are doing for you.
Yeah.
And but they forget things. Like that memory has holes in it. Whereas on type 2 thinking, the idea is that this thing is actually going to learn, it's going to teach itself, and it's going to have a model of the world. Because no matter how good those agents are, they don't have a model of the world, and so they don't care. They don't care about anything. They're not human. Obviously, they don't have feelings about things, but they also don't have a way to predict to predict what the consequences are of what it's doing. So that's why you're going to end up with that more and more.
So, Paul, we could talk about this
Oh yeah, there's a
all
lot to
day
talk about.
long. With the final thought on AI.
My final thought, I guess, I take from the perspective of my age. So I turned 61 this year.
Okay.
And I think about, how much life do I have left? So my lens is not so much about for myself, but I have 4, soon to be 5 granddaughters. And, how I look at them coming in to this society where we have 2 mixed types of intellect and how they are going to deal with that. Mm-hmm. It might be that as a society, we reject it for the most part. I don't know, how that's going to play out. But I think, my long-term thinking for them is I'm not really afraid of AI. There's so many other things to be afraid of. For them to be afraid of. They're 4 granddaughters. I don't know if the last one's going to be a girl or not yet. But like women grow up in kind of a dangerous world. Men too, but especially women. And I just wonder like how the AI is going to be used, how they're going to use it. And I can't even imagine, if we even get to this type 2 thinking, if that's even possible. We don't know. Research has not really proven it out yet. That but I think, well, maybe it will. So how is that going to affect their lives? Like, what will be the value of a human life at that point?
Mm.
And I don't know. And I think it's going to be a very difficult world to navigate.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I'm looking at, until I retire or whatever, something within the next decade or so. Uh, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity
Yeah.
to figure out how to apply it, and we're in that application phase, and that's what happened with the internet. And is like, oh, this tool became available, and then all of this technology and all of these applications were built on top of it. And we're at the point now where you can actually like build a company or build a system on top of AI. The difference is you're just going to have to run a lot faster, and
Yeah.
you're going to have to become very quick at learning. Good news is you have a really good learning assistant
Yeah.
to help you through the process. So I think we're going to be dependent on it, and I think you need to like just assume that's the case. And but don't become dependent on it.
Yeah.
Become its master and use it as a tool. And as we go through this application phase, you'll have lots of opportunities that you never would have even imagined were possible before.
Oh, thank you again for joining us.
Thank
We've
you.
learned so much.
Hey, it's great. I really enjoy the conversation, Dan, and I love your show.